Hey, good morning. You're watching Fair World Order, and this is Jeff. I'll be your host today. 21 January 2021, and apologize for that little the black screen there for a moment. For one button I forgot to turn on. So this is January 21st. This is the first full day of the Biden-Harris administration. And yesterday, I talked quite at length about my views of Joe Biden and why I thought he was the wrong choice for the Democratic ticket. And at this point, I'm kind of limited in what I can say about Joe Biden legally because of my day profession. However, I also teased yesterday that today I would air my views about the outgoing administration and Donald Trump, because out with the old and with the new. But with the old out, I can now actually say, for the first time in 4 years, everything that I believe about Donald Trump. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go through what I thought the issues with Donald Trump are, and why he was singularly such a horrific person. A lot of this shouldn't be new to anybody, but I do want to go back and recap some things. So, with that being said, let me pull up this. So here we have Donald Trump. Snarky little picture I picked for him, and I just want to remind everybody, 2016, specifically October of 2016, before the Me Too movement really kicked off for the Women's March, and I think right at the start of the Time's Up movement, just about 3 weeks before the actual election, before people actually went to the polls, we heard the audio of Donald Trump talking about how he treated women. And in the wake of that, a lot of women came forward with their accusations of sexual harassment or assault against Donald Trump. And now some of these and one story in particular I had been following for months prior to prior to October of 2016. So this was not in any way, shape, or form news to me. And in my own little corner of the universe, I did what I could to explain to people how horrific this man was, but it generally fell on deaf ears. So with that being said, these are just some of the 26 victims. Actually, I'll list the names of all 26 people that have come forward. I'm not going to show their pictures. I'm just going to state their names. They've all come out publicly, but I don't want to use their pictures without their permission. You have Jessica Leeds, Ivana Trump, one of, I think, Donald Trump's either first or second wife, Kristen Anderson, Jill Harth, Lisa Boyne, Maria Bellato, Victoria Hughes, E. Jean Carroll, Temple Taggart, Kathy Heller, Amy Doris, Karina Virginia, Karen Johnson, Tasha Dixon, Bridget Sullivan, Melinda McGillivray, Natasha Stoynoff, Jennifer Murphy, Juliet Huddy, Rachel Crooks, Samantha Holvey, Nini Laaksonen, Jessica Drake, Summer Zervos, Cassandra Surlis, Alva Johnson, and a Jane Doe that was age 13 at the time of her alleged rape. So most of these women, pretty much all of these women fall into some different categories of their assault. Excuse me, just one moment. And I think, yeah, I did butcher that. All right. So I apologize. I actually didn't have the right screen up as I was going through that. So those are all the names. So most of these women fall into a couple different categories. In some cases, many of those women were teenagers or women in various beauty pageants, Miss Teen USA, and I believe the Miss USA pageant. And they accused Donald Trump at various times of going into their changing room while they were in various states of undress or nude, and the discomfort they felt with him going in there. In some cases, these are women that have accused Donald Trump of groping them. I believe it was, in one case, groping a woman on an airplane, pinning women up against a wall, forcibly kissing them, grabbing their buttocks, being in a restaurant and a woman being trapped inside of a booth surrounded by men, and rather than getting up, forcing her to exit the table by standing up and actually walking over the table, and then commenting on what she was wearing underneath her skirt. In the case of the Jane Doe, her accusation was that she was raped multiple times by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at one of Jeffrey Epstein's residences. She attempted to sue Donald Trump before the presidential election. However, she ended up dropping her suit, and her actual identity has not been revealed. Although there was a name attached in some court records. I'm not going to say what the name was, but she did attempt to sue him. She filed affidavits, and then she backed out of her lawsuit. In the case of his wife, Ivana Trump, during their divorce proceedings, she described what would have been a rape: him pulling her hair, throwing her onto a bed, and then forcing himself on her. She later, during the 2016 election, stated that she wouldn't describe what happened as a rape. However, she never did recant the actions that she said happened. So in this case, you have a category of just barging in and harassing women in dressing rooms where he should not be, You have examples of groping, and then you have multiple examples of actual forcible rape on both Ivana and the Jane Doe. So, and if for anybody that thinks that these are just allegations or these are stories, I'm going to talk a little bit about some numbers. Generally, when we're dealing with sexual harassment and assault allegations, one of the hardest statistics to get a firm grasp on is the rate of false accusations. The statistic I see most often is 10%. 10% of all allegations turn out to be false. I don't actually know where this statistic comes from. I've been seeing it for about 20 years, and I don't really know how that stat is validated. Especially especially in this program when I'm going to be talking so much about the Innocence Project, there is a large room of error for people that are falsely accused and convicted, which would count as the 90%, but then a lot of those convictions end up getting overturned later. So the actual number of false accusations could be higher than 10%, although my prediction would be it would never be significantly higher. Maybe, I'm not even going to say a number, but there might be some room for the rate of false accusations to be higher than 10%. We just don't actually know. However, I'm going to assume that it's not significantly higher, and I'm going to use that number of 10%, and I'm going to keep that in mind when we look at some other statistics, such as for every 1,000 allegations of rape or sexual assaults, only 6 people end up going to jail. So that's a statistic that kind of haunts me. So I just want to have people keep those two stats in mind when we evaluate later on as the show goes forward. I'm going to spend more time talking about harassment and rape. And those are the kind of numbers that I want to keep people in mind to understand the scale of the problem. But going back to Donald Trump and his allegations, the allegations against him, if we assume that 10% rate is close to accurate, then we can start making a couple assumptions about accusations. Specifically, if you're dealing with, say, one accusation, one person, one victim accusing one assailant, a rate of 10% is extremely high for false accusations, and our justice system is predicated on the concept of we'd rather have 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person go to jail. So if you're dealing with one accuser against one assailant, that 10% number might cause us to err on the side of caution and say we really have to put the onus on the accuser and perhaps not prosecute the assailant, barring any physical, incontrovertible evidence. When you start dealing with multiple accusers saying the same thing, in this case, 26 different women, then there's a 10% chance for each woman that it's a false accusation. But the chances of every single one of them making a false accusation starts getting close to 0. So even if there are a couple of false accusations spread throughout that, it is safe to assume that a large majority of those accusations are legitimate and actually occurred. How many are there? Personally, I'm going to err on the side of saying that all of them are legitimate. But even if I'm being charitable and acknowledging that some might be false, we're probably still looking in the high teens, if not low 20s, of actual instances of Donald Trump committing sexual assault, harassment, or rape. And in a moment, I'm going to actually go through some of his words, because we actually have incontrovertible testimony from Donald Trump himself saying that he's done the things that he's accused of. So going back to the election, 2016, October 2016, Donald Trump's words, which I'm going to show here in a moment, come out. The actual audio, it's not somebody misquoting him, it's his voice saying this stuff, comes out. All these people start coming out with these accusations. and yet 60 million plus people decided to disregard all the evidence before them and vote for Donald Trump. And to me, that is just unconscionable. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time in a moment, a few minutes talking about all the other issues with Donald Trump. But for me, this issue right here, the harassment, the rape, the assaults, are an absolute showstopper. I don't care if he turned out to be the greatest president in history, it would be irrelevant to me. He never should have been president in the first place. It's we cannot live in a country where serial sexual predators are elevated to the highest office in the land. And we're now at a point where 3 of the last 5 presidents have credible accusations of sexual assault, harassment, or rape against them. 2 of the 9 Supreme Court justices have credible accusations of sexual harassment or assault against them. We can't continue living in a country like this and then deny that something like rape culture exists. So all the racism, all the fraud, all the self-dealing, all the other laws that Donald Trump has broken, to me, pale in comparison to this particular issue. And I'm gonna cut now to his actual words. So let's see. Sorry, just a moment here. Make sure I have this right. There it is. There's the right display. All right. So these are his words. And I'll go backstage before a show and everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant. They're standing there with no clothes, and you see these incredible looking women, and so I sort of get away with things like that. Donald J. Trump. Firstly, I'm as I was prepping this episode, I told myself I wasn't actually going to read that out loud, and then I just kind of did anyways. And I feel gross even saying that stuff. And here's a technique I like to use to kind of help me understand why certain things are wrong or why certain things happen. And I want everybody, anybody that is listening to this, to just take a moment. Now imagine that you are a 60-year-old man and you're approaching a door. On the other side of this door, is a room full of teenage girls, 15, 16 years old. And that they are going to be in various states of undress, nude, topless, because they're getting dressed for a pageant. This. What's happening on the other side of the door. Would you open that door and go through it and walk into this room of half-dressed or naked teenage girls? The answer is no. It should be no. Under no circumstance. Well, the only way I would even consider opening that door and going through is if it was a life-threatening emergency, such as an active shooter, a fire, aliens coming down and getting ready to blow the building up. There is no conceivable way I would justify going through that door and barging into this room, because it's wrong. Donald Trump admittedly did this on numerous occasions and bragged about it afterwards. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew why he was doing it. He was doing it for his own sense of gratification. That's sexual harassment of a minor. There is no alternate way to look at that. He did it. He did it repeatedly. He bragged about it. And over 60 million people looked the other way and decided to vote for him anyways. And I've got another quote from him. This is from the interview with Billy Bush. I'm not going to read this. I just, again, want to invite everybody to look at these words, consider what they actually mean, and then ask yourself, put yourself in that position. You're being interviewed by a reporter, or and then what would have to be going on inside your head to push that reporter up against a wall, force your tongue down her throat, and then grab her by the crotch? I can't comprehend doing that. And I can't comprehend tolerating anybody that would do that. That was our president. He said he did it. Multiple women said he did it. And over 60 million people chose to look the other way. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and bring myself back up now. So, for me, seeing Donald Trump actually win in, I think it was November 6th of 2016. My date might be wrong there. It was a gut punch for multiple reasons, and like so many other Americans, spent the next 4 years just in bewilderment that such a thing could happen. Um, and I want to talk a little bit now about some of the other issues. The racism with Donald Trump. Anybody that tries to deny it, that he was actually racist, that he was a white supremacist, I don't know what to do. Right. So going back to the 1970s, when he was fined by the Justice Department for racial discrimination, like, this was established in court. He told him and his father went to their apartment managers and said, do not rent these nice apartments to black people, period. Do not do it. That's game over. That's racism. That's white supremacy. Anybody that tries to deny that, you are literally denying the most obvious truth in front of you. That has nothing to say about the Central Park Five and his behavior towards them, his othering of Barack Obama, the birtherism. He has been stating loud and clear for decades that he believes people of color are of a lesser form of humanity than people that look like him. He's been saying it. It's not a secret. Just some people choose to willfully look the other way and ignore his statements. There's another issue, and what I think Donald Trump to be the worst kind of human being there is. And for this, I'm going to talk a little bit about game theory and ecology. So I never formally studied game theory or ecology. It was more of a side hobby while I was in college. It was a topic I found really interesting. But one thing that kept in several things that I read, there was a trend that came up multiple times, and it has to do with competitive strategies amongst people. And there's basically three broad types of strategies that people use in order to utilize other people as a resource. And they kind of go by different names depending on who the writer is. I'm going to use the words altruist, tit for tat, and egoist. So an altruist an altruist strategy is one in which you're willing to take a personal loss for the betterment of others. And there's some debate about whether pure altruism actually exists, or if it's all cases of reciprocal altruism, where you're willing to take a short-term loss, but there's an expectation for a long-term gain later on down the road. I think that's kind of it's not the most important discussion or the most important point to be made. What's important is that there are people that are willing to sacrifice themselves for others with no commitment, with no guarantee of getting a return on that investment. And that strategy is altruism. The overwhelming majority of people employ a strategy that would be called tit for tat, where they basically it's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. If you and I enter into a contract together, as long as you hold up your end of the deal, I'll hold up my end. As soon as you renege or screw me over, then I'm going to do the same to you. That's a tit for tat strategy. Overwhelming majority of people employ a tit for tat strategy. Then there are the egoists or the defectors. These are the people that are always looking at ways to break the contract when it's most advantageous to them. So these are the kind of people that you'll go in on a job with, and they'll say, "Hey, let me, give me an advance on my pay. I'm really hurting for money right now. I really need that advance." And you give them that advance, and then they just stop showing up. They've already gotten as much as they can out of it. They are now no longer going to put any more into that relationship. These are the consummate egoists. And when I look at Donald Trump and all of his behavior over his lifetime, what I see is the consummate egoist. Every single deal he's ever been involved in, he looked for ways to break that deal and twist it to his benefit. It's pretty notorious in his building projects where contractors would come, do a ton of work, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of work, and then he would just refuse to pay them. He would say, well, there's an issue here, there's an issue here, nitpick them, and then at the end of the day, just say, you can sue me, or you can just accept 15% of what I owe you. And most of these contractors who did not have the ability to sue would just have to accept pennies on the dollar of what they were owed, or else risk getting absolutely nothing. That's the behavior of a defector. And I'm not sure if it's 5 or 6 actual bankruptcies that he's filed, were all predicated on getting other people to invest in his properties, paying himself large bonuses, salaries, running the properties to the ground, and then leaving all his investors on the hook for all the debt. Meanwhile, he's already been paid, and he walks away fairly whole. That's a scam, and it's a scam he ran multiple times throughout his casinos. There's the charities where he would go into an agreement with somebody. You give me money, and it will go to this cause, and then he just wouldn't pay up. The money would go to the charity, and the charity became basically a slush fund for him and his family. This behavior is endemic throughout almost everything he's done, and he basically ran the country for 4 years as a defector. So pulling out of NAFTA, pulling out of the Iran arms, the Iran deal, pulling out of the Paris Accords, all of these contracts, and whether you believe that these contracts are valid or flawed or not, they were agreements with other countries, and he just unilaterally pulled away from them for the express purpose of getting a better deal. And we don't yet know what the ramifications of that is going to be long term as we try to negotiate with countries in the future. That he may have had some short-term gains, but it is almost a guarantee that it's going to come at a long-term cost that he won't have to bear, but we, the American people, will for decades. And then, of course, you can take the racism, you can take the sexual harassment, the allegations, the fraud, the enumerations clause that he's been violating every single second of his presidency. And you can take all that, and it still pales in comparison to the fascism. There's some debate. There's been some argument since 2016 of whether or not he was fascist. I think after January 6th, we can put that to bed. He was a fascist. The fact that he failed to turn the country into a fascist country is irrelevant. He himself was a fascist and always has been. And by fascism, this is one of those terms that kind of gets used in different ways by different people. So I want to be clear what I mean by fascism. So fascism, for me, how I use it is the employment of a mythological past to justify a specific hierarchical social structure of today, predicated on the suppression of the creation of an in-group and the oppression of an out-group within that society, and the concentration of power and wealth within that in-group. So this is what we tend to see in fascistic countries. They invent a mythological past which justifies consolidating wealth and power within a specific group. And then they use the machinations of the state to oppress anybody not in that group. In Nazi Germany, it was the Aryan race and the mythology of the Aryan race, which never actually existed. And with Donald Trump, it was really harkening back to this old America when things were great. Although he never did specify when America was great, what period he was referring to. We just know it was sometime before people of color, women started getting their own voice, and that voice being recognized by the state. So he espoused fascistic beliefs from the very outset of his candidacy, if not before that. And it was the only question was, to what extent would the state begin to bend to those beliefs? And he pushed it as far as he possibly could up to January 6th, when a group of, and I don't care, there's a lot of argument about what to call these people: fascists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, domestic terrorisms. These terms aren't mutually exclusive. They all apply. So this group of white supremacists, neo-Nazi, fascists, domestic terrorists stormed the Capitol building with the expressed intent of upending a democratic election and assassinating political rivals. And this was all done at the behest of Donald Trump and his surrogates in the moments leading up to this uprising. So for me, what is the appropriate course of action for a person who uses the language of populism in order to upend democracy and instill an authoritarian regime? What should we do with that person? To me, nothing is off the table. I would start the discussion with public execution. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that as a joke. I think that is the appropriate, or at least a appropriate outcome for somebody who tries to turn a democracy into an authoritarian state. And later on, we're going to have a discussion about just how democratic the United States is. But the wheels of democracy are in place. He tried to take those wheels off for his own benefit. So incarceration, exile, execution, all of these things would be on the table for me. What's not on the table is a free pass or a pardon. His crimes against this country are more significant than any single individual human has done since the United States was formed. And those crimes cannot go unanswered. So, I apologize if my tone is a little bit forceful or uncompromising, but I truly believe that Donald Trump is one of, if not the single worst American in the history in public discourse in the public eye since the country was founded. Worse than serial killers, worse than serial rapists, worse than McCarthy, worse than Strom Thurmond, worse than General Lee. He is as bad as a human being could possibly be. And over 60 million people voted for him in 2016. Over 70 million people voted for him in 2020. And we need to have a strong, hard look at why tens of million people fell for this man. So, so kind of early in the morning to be talking about this stuff, but this is the first time in 4 years that I've actually been able to publicly say everything I think. So thank you for listening for that. And now we gotta we just got to move forward. Hopefully with this new administration, there was a flurry of executive orders that Joe Biden signed yesterday. So most of those executive orders were just done. Seems like they're just undoing the worst of the Trump decisions. It's yet to be seen if there will be a true movement towards justice in this country, justice and equality. We'll see. I'm very skeptical about that, but at least we have a chance of doing something now. Now, with that being said, I'm going to cut over to the next segment, and this is going to be. I did this yesterday, and we're going to go look at another person today, and that is. Here we go. All right. So this comes to us again from the Innocence Project, and today we're going to be looking at Randolph Arledge. So Randolph was convicted of rape and murder, based almost entirely by informant testimony. And in 1981, Carolyn Armstrong was found murdered. This is horrible. Randy was convicted in 1984, and then he was ultimately, after 29 years, released in 2013 based on DNA evidence. And same thing we saw when we looked at the case yesterday. The actual guilty person was actually already in jail for another crime, but. See what his name was. David Sims. David Sims was the actual person who committed this horrific crime, and then after presented with the DNA evidence, he admitted to the murder of Carolyn Armstrong. So once again, we see this man, Randy Arledge, 29 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and that's 29 years of the actual murderer walking free, although he was in jail for a lot of that because, and not just that he was walking free, but because he was free, he had the opportunity to commit other crimes and create other victims. So again, the Innocence Project isn't just about overturning wrongful convictions. It is truly about getting real justice for the victims. Back to me there. All right. So when somebody is wrongfully, so you have an actual victim, in this case, Miss Armstrong. You have somebody that actually committed that crime. And then you have somebody, a completely innocent person who had nothing to do with this, in jail. That person who actually convicted it, when prosecutors prosecute the wrong person, they create other victims down the road. So in this instance, where there would have been one victim, the actual murder, which is horrific in and of itself, the sloppy prosecution, the wrongful prosecution of Mr. Armstrong created so many other victims. Created Mr. Arledge as a victim, and it created everybody that Mr. Sims encountered in that 29 years. It created all those victims as well. It's why it's so important to put ego aside, put your own biases aside as a prosecutor, as a law enforcement officer, and to always question yourself and always say, is there a possibility that I've made a mistake? And what are the ramifications if I've made a mistake? At some point, I'll talk about the Central Park Five, and the spoiler warning. The most egregious part of that entire case is that the prosecutor, even after the DNA came back and said that those 5 young boys were innocent, the prosecutor still insists she did nothing wrong. And that's just it's just mind-boggling. Even when faced with actual evidence, even faced with the actual person who did the actual crime, she still insists she did nothing wrong. So that's going to be it. That's going to be the show today. As always, I like to end the show with considering all the serious stuff that we're going to be talking about. And as the show goes on, I'm going to spend more time on things that are uplifting and positive. But I really had to get my thoughts out on Biden and Trump in these first couple days. But I'm going to try to end the show on something a little more positive. So here's the last word, and here's your daily dose of the cats of TikTok. Actually, in this case, it's going to be dogs. So animals of TikTok. Thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.
Look at my happy guy. Oh, just a happy guy. Oh, just a look at that, the happy dog. Oh, just a happy